All right, stream has been updated. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Um, I'm here with Matthew CR, otherwise known as Uniform
Hello.
Collector on Instagram. He
Hiya.
does uniform design and development for films, uh, music videos, and short projects, as well as making his own impressions, which are top notch considering some of the loopholes he goes through to save money and create an accurate impression.
I'm an unbelievably cheap fucker, honestly. I'm like, I think I think I've kind of always been a totally just cheap fuck, which is not only a summation of my personal career but also my Tinder bio. So, um, I think, I think certainly, oh fuck, I'm just absolutely battering stuff around. I think. What was the question? No, we're just introducing ourselves.
Yeah, we
Fuck
just
me. Aye. Sorry, I'll let you lead the way. This is your stream. You don't
yeah.
need me fucking
No, you're
waffling on like
fine.
an
You're
old man with
fine.
dementia.
Um, yeah, so you are one of the founding members of the First Battalion Boys, which is an
I am.
airsoft group in the United Kingdom, which basically
Yes.
focuses on helping people get not only into the reenactment hobby, but also has a different take on airsoft, which I appreciate as someone who likes doing airsoft World War I style in a world where everyone loves to do modern loadouts, operator style with HPA speed saw style guns, which is too much like paintball for me. And if I'm going to play that style, I'm going to play paintball where you actually know if you've been hit or not. So I like the whole
Exactly.
idea of more
Exactly.
tactical airsoft, and seeing what you guys have done is honestly very, very much so what I would eventually like to do in terms of starting something like that out here in the United
Well, the,
States.
the credit really has to go to Sunshine Jack on Instagram. Jack is the founding member of the First Time Boys. He has shifted heaven and earth in order to make the First Battalion Boys more than just a couple of fucking dickheads running around in uniform to like a full.
Whoops, 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 whoops. I just clicked out of Discord because I'm stupid. Come on, bring it back. I
Of the sort of the group, if you will. Um, so, I'm not in charge, but I was one of the first members on board, which is great, and it's been a wonderful experience to sort of because the thing I find with reenactment is it can be elitist, it can be gatekeeping, and there is a very high barrier to entry. Someone once told me that it's a young man's hobby only old men can afford.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely a hobby
when
where
bringing
there's
large,
you know
oh no,
a
go on.
lot of toxicity in it. Sorry, apologies
Yes.
for the craziness. I
Oh no.
literally middle clicked the Discord tab and everything went crazy. I'm gonna go ahead
Oh,
and just
excellent.
move it so that I don't accidentally close it again. I have a tendency to close any tab that I'm not actively using just because I don't like having multiple tabs open, and that's killed me multiple times in Discord
Aye,
calls. So I
of
apologize
course, of
everybody for
course.
that. We're doing
Um,
this in a janky way because Streamlabs is being very, or Lightstream is being very hard to deal with today for some reason. And I'm trying to make it so that I can actually read chat while the stream's going on. There we go. Cool. We're all good now. Sorry about that.
yeah, so we do what we sort of term as LARP soft, sort of half between reenacting and airsoft as a whole. We have, because obviously with reenacting, it's usually quite scripted battles. You decide who's going to die. It's very much, it is to history what wrestling is to sport. It's a very planned theatrical display of great feats of historical research and ingenuity and whatnot. But it is fundamentally scripted, and obviously airsoft is very much a wild card sport. You can play to win, and having that ability to play to win in a reenactment scenario with certain scripted events really does add a whole new depth of field to to airsoft and to reenactment as kind of a
Yeah.
combined pursuit.
Yeah, it's interesting because with doing it airsoft style, you can have that same amount of accuracy as you do with reenactment in terms of the look of everything and the feel of sitting there and sleeping under the stars and wearing all your uniforms and using all the equipment that they would have used back in the day. But you just don't get the sounds of the gunfire, but you get more of the
Yeah,
realism in terms of the battles because you don't have the whole thing where it's like, I have to say that I'm hit because there's a limited chance of me surviving, when in reality, you can actually charge those MG positions and have a chance to make it through to do some Alvin York type of maneuver. And
exactly.
that's what I like about the airsoft aspect. If you could somehow make it to where you have the sound of the blank firing guns and the engagement that airsoft brings, that'd be such a cool like mixture of things. Even if it was something janky like a sound box on your gun that made a sound every single time you shot. But I don't know. It's airsoft to me has such a better feel when you are actually doing it than firing your gun with no recoil.
Exactly. I'll actually close my window for the.
You're all good.
So, I mean, in terms of, you mentioned the accuracy there. Obviously, airsoft is not as accurate as reenactment because there are certain kind of liberties we have to take for the sake of practicality. You'll know yourself that you have an airsoft currently. You have the S&T one, right?
I think so. I forget what type of Car 98
You'll,
I have.
but you'll know yourself that the magazines for that gun don't fit in a 3-cell Gewehr 98 pouch.
Yeah, definitely not. Unfortunately
Yeah,
not.
so personally, for my kit, I tend to use. I actually had it to hand here. I tend to use the World War I German medical pouches because they're a single cell pouch that fits your magazines for both, Lugers and 1911s and all that kind of stuff, and allows a great deal of practicality. While it wouldn't be accurate for everyone carrying medic pouches, I mean, they do look similar to the Gewehr 88 pouches. It is significantly more practical because otherwise you don't have a place to store your magazines as such.
Oh yeah, for
Otherwise,
sure.
you take up the space for your pocket litter. And for Lee Enfield's, the pattern 08 webbing, the British stuff is, doesn't hold a damn thing. I have mine filled with sponges to make it look like it's full without actually adding any weight to it. So I personally use for my enlisted man's kit. I don't have a proper repro tunic. I have a Swedish tunic that I started converting when I was 18, so about 6 years ago now. And slowly over time built it to be more and more accurate by tailoring, adding piping, redoing the collar, adding belt hook ramps, and collar hooks to keep the collar in a stand fall formation. We do, while we aim to be as accurate as possible, we don't have the the stitch counter mentality of. Well, I think you'll find by 1915 the pouches were actually blackened as a Kaiserbefehl in order to reduce visibility on the front line. Our aim is for people to have fun in a historical setting.
Yeah.
So we do provide a much, well, not, I wouldn't say a much more relaxed. We do have minimum uniform requirements and whatnot, but we do have a bit more flexibility for the sake of practicality, because obviously war at the end of the day isn't fun. The guys on the frontline trenches of the Western Front weren't having a gay old time.
No, not at all.
They were in a pretty shitty situation, and if we wanted to go out there and spend 9 days at a time in the mud, getting trench foot and scrubbing lice off our ball sack for 12 hours a day, sure, we could go and do that, but we won't have fun with it. The key of airsoft is to have fun, to be part of a community, and to do that in a historical way and in a way that's immersive and is a milsim event, while still trying to portray as much historical accuracy as we can without reducing our practicality and our ability to have fun with it. Is certainly something that we really sort of pride ourselves on. Yeah,
for sure. It's interesting because I would do campouts with my friends out in California when we were doing stuff for airsoft and for reenactment, and most of them did German World War II, and I personally use a World War II style Zeltbahn tent with four of the triangles versus the World War One Zeltbahn because I had the opportunity to buy 4 Zeltbahn triangles, World War II style, but in the World War One color because they were Africa Corps style Zeltbahns, I think, for like
Yeah, of course. Aye.
$100. For $100, and each World War One Zeltbahn square costs $100, and I already had one.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
go off and be like, oh yeah, I can just have a full Zeltbahn that's World War II style versus buying 3 more squares from my World War One at a third the cost.
Well, do you guys practice? I know there's the Combined Forces Living History group is one of the larger British groups that do all sort of like British stuff from the Boer War up until like the Falklands. They do a whole range of. They don't portray just a single unit or division or regiment even. They portray a wide array, and a lot of the guys in the British community do exercise the 3-meter rule, where if it looks good from 10 feet. And it doesn't look out of place at 10 feet, then you can get away with it, because obviously there are things that aren't made to reproduction.
Yeah.
We can't reproduce everything. So sometimes we do have to make substitutions.
Or things are abhorrently expensive to get proper reproductions of, such as low boots. You can't get good quality low boots unless you want to spend an arm and a leg, but you can go off to the store and buy decent leather hiking boots that look almost exactly the same unless you get up close to it.
I mean, personally, I use the World War II model snowshoe, the sort of the low boots, the hobnailed low boots. I got those. They had. So I'm a US size 13. So trying to find boots for me is an absolute horrible pain in the dick. So I'd found a pair of this UK size 12 German low boots on sale from SOF. For like 50 quid, and I was like, I can't pass that up. Hobnail boots for £50, and they've done me well.
Yeah,
they've done me
definitely
really well.
It's one of those things where the only people who are going to critique you are the people that you shouldn't really be listening to anyway, in terms of who you should respect their opinions, because you have so many people who are uptight about it because they've spent so much money on their kit that they can't stand the fact that someone has found a cheaper route to do it that looks almost just as good. So they have to go.
And a lot of it really boils down to sort of
like
one sentence that I find to be kind of totally just white, where it's like, you are having fun the wrong way.
Yeah.
You're not having fun in the correct way that you should be having fun.
It's funny though. Like I have jet black pouches and a World War II style belt, and I've gotten called out on that only by people who obviously make the reenactment thing their entire personality, where you look at their Facebook page and everything is reenactment. And you look at, they don't have that separation. Yeah, no, I'm really big in reenactment and history, and I feel like it's too big of a part of my personality, but I'm not sitting there making it everything I talk about 24/7.
Yeah, because are you still doing your history major at the moment?
I'm looking towards doing that eventually, but I find it ridiculous. Right, like, you have jet black pouches that are basically the same color as I have 2 original pouches from World War One, German pouches. Actually, I have 3. One of them is brown, which is something that's funny because I thought that they dyed all of them, right? I thought they blackened all of them. No, they didn't. But I digress. And I have 2 black ones that were blackened. And the backs of them are still a little brown because they didn't blacken the backs of them. Otherwise, they'd get their uniform dirty.
Yeah.
And they're
I have World War II pouches that are black and that are brown on the back.
Yeah, and these World War One pouches, which were blackened, are the same color black as my jet black pouches. The difference is they look older. And I'm just like, yeah, I get it. You should buy brown ones and you should blacken them because that will look better. But they're not
at the end of the day. Exactly. Well, I have done a number of things on theatre, like acting-wise, and one of the biggest tips that I sort of took on from like stage acting was that if you fuck up your script, the audience don't know that you fucked up your script. If you were meant to say to where, but instead you said where to, you fucked that up because you know the script.
Yeah.
And the cast around you know the script, but the audience don't know the script. The main thing to remember is the key points of the scene, the entries, the exit, the main message. And generally, if you mess with a couple of words, that's fine because you need to know where the scene is going at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And when you're doing stuff where we're trying to educate the public, all you need to do is show them sort of where you're entering from, where you're exiting, and what the key points are. sure, you know that they're maybe not the correct pouches, and people around you know that they're not correct pouches. But to the general public who may, who don't have an entire personality, an entire niche hobby based around the recreation of historic uniforms from hundreds of years ago, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, because you're still portraying history as faithfully as can be done in an efficient manner, in accordance with the fact that you also have a life to live and work to do, and cigarettes to smoke and beer to drink. There is more to reenactment than because at the end of the day, you're going to get home from an event. You sit there, you're going to go, that was a great event, not, that was a really good event because behind my pouches and behind the belt and on the place that only I can see, if I bend down and look only from my specific angle, I can see a little bit of brown, and that makes me feel like a fucking class guy.
Yeah. It's funny because, when it comes down to it, the most important thing is that you're not representing something that was 100% the exception. If I'm going to an event where I'm going to be dressed up in my uniform because I'm there for a living history event, I'm not going to be bringing my airsoft MP18. If I'm going to be using a weapon at all, it's going to be something that looks close to my Gewehr 98 or is my Gewehr 98, because that was the standard weapon of the German army in World War I, especially for my regiment.
Exactly.
I'm not going to be wearing Y straps. Even if you're a regiment that might use Y straps as what they typically wore, I still think it's a little bit disingenuous to wear them at living history events where it's just general German stuff, because the Western Front movie from the 1970s really screwed up people's perceptions of what the German army looked like and was.
Yeah.
And they took so many shortcuts in that film on the uniform, which, you probably know.
Well, the reason that I own a Swiss Tornister is actually as a homage to, because I have two Tornisters. I have an original Tornister that's named and marked to a guy from Düsseldorf with an original mess kit attached. But the first Tornister I got was a Swiss medical Tornister, which are actually the ones that are used on screen in All Quiet on the Western Front from 1979. And I kind of bought that knowing it was kind of farm, but I got it for £30 when I was in Berlin. I had it shipped back to Scotland for me getting home. But I got that more as a homage to a film that ultimately was the first thing to really kind of spark my interest in what would become, kind of eventually becoming something that I would like to ideally turn into a career that I'm kind of doing odd jobs in just now as, some of my early 20s.
Yeah, it's definitely important to get the uniform right. But even then, if you can't get it perfect, as long as you're not doing improper stereotypes, the most important thing is to have answers to questions and be able to talk about who your regiment is, what your regiment did, what your specific regiment did. That's why I have such a specific drive to learn as much about the 17th as I can, because I need to be able to talk about what exactly it is that I'm reenacting. What did this regiment do? What was it that they did that changed the outlook of the war? Did they do anything major? Were they just a backup unit? Because that can help teach people this is the reality of this war. These weren't faceless people just in the trenches. This is what they did. These were where they were from in Germany, and this is what they did towards the end of the war when things were collapsing. And so, due to all this tons of research that I've tried to do, I have two of the three. So the memoirs that were made, they had 3 parts. I have 2 of those parts. I'm just missing one of the parts, which is pretty cool. They were both owned by a veteran of the regiment, and the books are filled with notes from him, underlining important parts or circling something and making a note about it, like filling in a name about someone who perished or talking about someone in the margins of the page. And it's a pretty cool book to have. And then I have a whole stack of original photos about this high, and then a massive folder.
Yeah, I've seen your photo collection. It's pretty fucking cool.
Digital ones that I've been able to find over the years, either eBay ones that I wasn't able to get because they were on bid, or because I didn't want to spend €40 on a picture that is just a portrait of someone who probably is from the Reserve Infantry Regiment 17.
Exactly. And see, we don't portray an actual unit in the 1st Battalion Boys to kind of avoid that getting bogged down in history and going, well, actually, we can't do this kind of impression because the 6th Devon Infantry wouldn't have done so, or the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders wouldn't have worn this particular tunic at that time. We portray a sort of a fictional unit so that we can be more inclusive and accommodate a much more wide variety of the artistic pursuits people want to pursue within, the realms of World War One airsoft.
Yeah. So, what got you into making uniforms and going down the route of basically being someone who does something similar to what the people in Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan did, where you want to make the uniforms for movies, for music videos, and you want to sort of help design those things?
To be honest, I kind of got into it by accident. I started collecting when I was 5 years old. So I
Ah,
started collecting 19 years ago. I got given a box full of old shit by a cousin who was leaving to join the army. And one of these third cousin, twice removed, one of those ones I've met twice and haven't seen in 10 years. He gave me a box of stuff that contained a couple of British Army scrim nets from the Falkland era, a Mark V turtle shell helmet, and a pattern 37 large pack, British large pack, date from 1942, and two Hungarian civil defence VM-75 gas masks. For a while, I would collect bits and bobs, just wee things here or there, and eventually I got into collecting gas masks. To begin with, I specialised in NBC equipment. I had a large collection of gas masks. I then later sold them on, kind of got out of that. And then I bought a Soviet greatcoat from the Third Shock Army that had a story ascribed to it. I bought it from a British soldier who had bought it from a Russian soldier the day that the Berlin Wall came down. The Soviet soldier had abandoned his post with the armoured division and had jacked a UAZ and just went, fuck this, I'm going west.
wow.
The Union's crumbling, Berlin's reunified, I want a shot at the west and see how the free world lives. So he jacked a UAZ and he got to Magdeburg train station, at which point he ran out of petrol. And obviously when you're a British soldier in West Germany and a lone Soviet soldier rolls up in a UAZ, you get suspicious of the cunt. So the British soldiers kind of swarmed around him and they're like, the fuck are you doing here? And he's like, I have no money. Please, buy. And he sold the uniform off his back to buy petrol to head further west to desert. And that British soldier kept it for how many years? I must have got it about 10 years ago. And I got it for £40. And he sent me the whole story of him acquiring it. And that was my first real piece. But, I came from a very poor background, very rural, only child to a single mother. Scotland is cold. Scotland's cold as fuck. There's been days where, like summer into winter, where there's cities in Siberia that actually have a warmer temperature than Scotland sometimes. So I would wear this coat when I was walking the dog. And, I became, I wanted to do some cosplay stuff with it, certain kind of cosplay stuff. And then I got into airsoft running modern kit. And then I thought, I want to make more unique kits for airsoft. So I decided I was going to make a Soviet tank one using that great coat. But I couldn't afford boots. So I eventually managed to find finished boots for £40. And I made a jacket that I still have that I used to wear to school. I put some Soviet patch on that. And it's like, like the typical height of fucking farbery. But knowing what I know now, that, this isn't right, and then I get kind of annoyed because something's not quite right, and, this should be better, and, this isn't a clean stitch here, that's not a clean stitch there. At the time when you're 13, 14, 15, when you just kind of get into it, everything you do is the best thing you've ever done. And there's certainly a childlike wonder of having built these things for the first time, being immensely proud because you don't know any better, because, you're a child at the end of the day. Still, and you're making these costumes that look cool, and they have the same vibe and the same outline, the same silhouette as what you imagine the real thing would look like, but you're doing it on the budget of someone in their early teens. So I got some finished jack boots, and I had just a regular trouser belt to go around my waist. I'd used my turtle shell helmet instead of an SSH-40, and I managed to save up enough to buy a Cyma AKS-47, and I would run that kit even in the summer when it was 30 degrees out, scorching hot. I'd be running around in Soviet winter kit because I was just so proud to have made something that was unique and I hadn't seen before. And as opposed to using Y straps, I used a pair of trouser braces, elastic braces that I just clipped on to the belt, and there was this inherent childlike wonder of this is the coolest thing I've ever done. And then slowly as you start to, I didn't take history in high school. I left high school when I was 16, having had quite a turbulent time with education and not returning to education until I was into my early 20s, going to college and then university to go and major in history and film and media. Over time, I started to collect more. When I got a job when I was 18, I had my own money coming in. And, I was getting paid good money to answer phones for a telecom company. And, I was, what money I wasn't spending on shitloads of weed, I was spending on uniforms and stuff that I'd buy on eBay. And I thought, I started coming across places like Epic Militaria. And I thought, well, I really wanted that Africorps kit because Richthofen and Nazi zombies used an Africorps tunic with General's collar tabs. And I still have the General's collar tab. I've since sold the tunic. Because it was too short for me even then, because I didn't really know the sizing system, but I just loved it so much. I wore it. I didn't have any insignia on it. I just wore this desert jacket that I thought looked cool as fuck. And then over time it became part of my style, where I would wear vintage military style stuff, and then I would collect. And I thought, well, I want to make a World War II German officer's kit because I like it. And I found a cap in a military store in Glasgow. I thought, yeah, let's do that. So I built this Swedish conversion tunic that really was utter dog shit, and it's still shit. It's better now because I've added a M36 bottle green collar, but it's still very visibly a Swedish tunic. But I was starting to get the ball rolling of just learning how to sew. I remember when I started doing my World War I tunic, I was still 18, I was still skateboarding and smoking joints all the time and going through like a lot of weed. And I got really stoned and I put on Castaway on the TV with Tom Hanks. And I sat and in between crying at him, stuck in this, well, son! His emotional heart just needs to be baked out my fucking box. Just watching Tom Hanks just pour his heart out to a volleyball. I was sat there haphazardly stitching red piping onto this Swedish tunic, thinking this is the coolest thing, because Battlefield 1 had just come out, and I didn't have a next gen console that could play Battlefield 1, but I loved the aesthetic of it. And my girlfriend at the time, whom I lived with 6 years ago, her friend was at university, Melissa, a German American who studied here, and she was the vice president of what's called AIR TV, which is the Stirling University Film Society. And Melissa and my girlfriend at the time, Katie, were very good friends. And Melissa knew that I'd collected. She was throwing a Germany-themed birthday party, so I showed up in Bundeswehr stuff. And like a Bundeswehr parade tunic, die Paradenanzug, oder Ausganganzug. And I can't even fit into that tunic now. Like, it was tight then. It's fucking impossible now. She had noticed that I'd collecting, and I had probably less than 10% of knowledge that I have now. I had a very rudimentary knowledge about these kind of things, but I sort of knew where to get my news. I knew the markets for eBay, and I use eBay more as a social media than I do a form of buying stuff. I check and see what's new and what's the crack. And Melissa had said to me, Matthew, a guy in the film society is making a World War II film, but he's not very clued up in costumes. Do you reckon you could help? I thought, I don't know. I don't know if I'm cut out for it. I don't know. I don't really know the first thing about making films. But yeah, I've got some stuff to hand. I have my own like D-Boys Car 98, the bolt handle is sheared off, and I had a Spring Mauser M712 that I, for a Booker DeWitt cosplay, I blackwashed it and I just dry brushed it so it looked, and I put a little lanyard thing at the bottom, so it looked the part for someone who was 18 and still basically just cutting around with their dick in their hand all the time. So I ended up going on set for this student film, and it ended up doing well. I was an extra. I got a speaking part. It was my first time ever really acting, and it then went to a film festival where it was the highest grossing. It was a university film festival where all the people from RTV had made these student films, and they rented a cinema and they would present the ATVAs, kind of the what the ATVAs were to AirTV what the Oscars are to, big boy films.
Yeah.
And me not even being a student or part of the society, I was nominated and won an Oscar for production design because they had deemed my, shit ass, zero budget, fucking half done Farbery to be worthy of recognition because, it looked the part to these people who may not have known the thing. But to me, I was like, well, this isn't a British denizen for the paras. It's a Swedish camouflage or a Finnish camouflage tunic, and I put the berets on wrong because I was putting the berets over cat badge over the left eye, but I was doing it my left, not theirs. So all the berets, if you watch the film now, it's still on YouTube. All the berets are on the wrong way fucking round because I'd forgot, and that was something that I just kind of started. And then eventually that director wanted to make another film, a World War II horror film. The first film he made was called Overlord. He decided to make a World War II horror film called Draugr. So I played a soldier in that. I did some production design for it. And that won a number of awards as well. And by that point, I had started getting into... Oh, and then J.J. Abrams made a World War II horror film called Overlord, and that fucking destroyed both of our films. Now, whenever you search for either of them, only J.J. Abrams shit comes up. You'll never find the actual one that we fucking made. Yeah, that was a right kick in the balls. So then after that, I thought, well, maybe I'm okay at this. I don't really like it. So I'm still sort of learning stuff. It was that innate sense of Farbery that comes with innocence of just not knowing any better because you're still just getting used to it. And then I started doing some theatre stuff, and I did Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, where I got asked to audition by one of the guys who was in Overlord because he was directing it, and he said, "Oh, I think you'd be perfect for a part. You should come round and audition. I'd love to see you audition for this." And I thought, I've never really done any acting in my fucking life. Apart from me just going Spellfire and doing one shitty little film, right? I've never done any real proper acting with scripts and all that kind of shit. So I went along and I auditioned as a formality because I wouldn't want to say, "Oh yeah, I'll come along," and then not go because that'll make me look a dick. So I went along and I auditioned and I sort of didn't really put the effort in because I was like, I'm not expecting to get a part. I don't want to get a part. I'm just here to show face and then go home. And I accidentally landed the lead role of the production. I was like, fuck, motherfucker. All right, cool. God damn it.
Why am I so good at this?
Okay. Fucking shit. So, a month of rehearsals. And I did all the production design. There was rehearsals 3 hours a day, 5 nights a week. After, while working a 40-hour-a-week job. I wasn't even at university this time. I was still working in the call center. And we did this production set in Victorian London, and I went through and I became the costume designer as well as the lead role because I knew men's tailoring and I knew vintage attire and I knew this Victorian way of dressing. I had my own tailcoat that I got for my 18th birthday, and I've worn maybe 5 times, one of which was yesterday. So I ended up loaning all this stuff out, and then word kind of got round that I was a good guy to speak to with costumes. Meanwhile, I'm just there, my dick in my hand, being like, I don't know a fucking thing. And then they would kind of continually come back to me, and I sort of had to learn while I was doing it. So I fell into this entirely accidentally. And then
you just kind of were like, things started lining up, and you just took advantage of those opportunities.
I didn't make this happen. It just fucking happened, and I just happened to be in the same room as it. So over time, I ended up making some friends in the industry, some good graduates, and doing some stage stuff, building sort of a semi-show reel, and then advertising on Scottish filmmakers and actors, saying that I've got kit, and then people would get in touch, and then I started getting some paid jobs, and I thought, you get this real sense of imposter syndrome, being like, I'm just some fucking call center worker who's like, guns are cool, don't you like wool jackets? And then suddenly you go from being this 19, 20, 21-year-old boy, barely a man, someone who's only just learned to wipe their ass and tie their shoes less than a decade ago. You get this sense of imposter syndrome because you are this young adult, this child, dare I say, man, who is ending up being the on-set expert
Yeah,
when you're
you've got
20,
everyone.
21,
You've got
adults
everyone
don't
looking to
listen to you.
you for
Yeah,
how
adults
to
don't
set
listen to you when
things
you're
up.
that age. Like, when I was 19, if I spoke to an adult, they'd go, fuck off, you little shit. Because my shit doesn't matter. Because I'm 19, I'm 18, I haven't lived. I've not done anything more than roll a joint and scratch my balls in the past 72 hours. And then suddenly, you've got men in their 40s and their 50s and production teams and men and women who have went to university and had graduated and done all these amazing things, turning to you and saying, well, what do you think? What do you think? And you go, fuck, I shouldn't be thinking anything. I don't belong here. So you do get this imposter syndrome that you don't belong, and you know it's hard. But then
You
over
almost feel
time,
like
I've learned to
someone's going to ask you a question, you're going to answer, and they'll be like, "I asked you that to figure out if you were an idiot or not, and you just answered wrong."
exactly. That was a test, motherfucker. Get off
And
my
then they're just
set.
going to call you out and be like, "You're an idiot. Get out of here. Go,
Yeah,
go."
it's like, look at this fucking village idiot. So yeah, I was like, fuck. So eventually I started, getting into the idea of reenacting and doing more historical airsoft and building stuff and learning. And then I made the Instagram account, I think 2018, so like 3 years ago. And I made it just as I'll put my stuff that I build on here. And then it got, I remember when I was doing my German officers kit, which I didn't know anything about German officers kit. I got the tunic, and then someone went, well, the stand call is actually a guard regiment tunic, so you'll need to do a guard thing. I was like, right, okay, well, I'll do a guard thing. So I built it as a guard thing, and I got, even before I had my correct shoulder boards or my belt or my insignia for my collar, my Litzen, and my Kragenspiele, I bought a cap. I cap from SOF, and I still have it, and it's just okay. It's just okay. It's not like a great. It's like a 1915 pattern of cap with quite the long brim that sort of looks more akin to an NCO visor
Yeah.
cap. Yeah, it has the officer's gabardine material. And I put a crush on it. I had this. I thought I was really cool by having this really long goatee. I looked like if someone put Ian McCullen on heroin and beat him with a shovel for weeks on end. And I put this on Instagram, and it got 1,000 likes. And I remember sitting in my chair, freaking the fuck out, because I was like, I'm just some guy.
Yeah.
And then people now look to me as some form of, I don't want to say expert, because that makes me sound like a fucking dick, but as some sort of, almost a sort of an authority of what goes and what doesn't with
People go to you
uniforms.
asking,
And at
"Hey,
the same day,
does this look good? Does this look like an appropriate tunic?" And you're just
mm,
like, "I built my stuff based off surplus militaria that was cheap. Like
yeah,
you're spending
what
money
was
on good
available.
reproduction." It's like I don't.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, that looks good, and that's correct. I don't have the money to buy it, but I I
Yeah.
get to the point where I know what looks good, and just like scrolling through eBay, and I find that, as you said, you've got countless numbers of files that are saved, from pictures from eBay that you couldn't afford to get or didn't win the bid. And I find that scrolling through like original listings of photos is a great way, because when you type in World War One German soldier onto Google Images, what comes up is the guy from History Bunker looking like he just had a terminal diagnosis of a liver ulcer.
or that
Right?
he's being held at gunpoint. Take
Is
these
being held at
pictures, or
gunpoint.
we
It's like,
will shoot
take the
you.
fucking photo, Frank, or we'll kill your fucking family. So, so going through these World War One German photos on eBay is a great way to see original reference photos. And when I was in
Yeah.
Berlin, I bought a whole bunch of stuff. And just sort of over time, my Instagram started getting a following. I've got, there's people from the reenactment community that follow me, people from the airsoft community that follow me. There's cosplayers that follow me, LARPers that follow me, and more recently, uniform fetishists, which
Ah.
I have somewhat of a standing in the LGBT community, which is great. But I have lost hundreds of followers for denouncing racism. I've had people phone that think, oh,
Yeah.
well, he wears a German uniform, therefore he must hate the Jews.
And then
People,
it's
mailing me saying, well, I remember a message I got from a guy that was like, well, I'm a neo. I prefer. I think the term Nazi is offensive. I prefer to be called the Natsok, National Socialist. And I've done the reading. And I've concluded that sub-Saharan Africans are not just a different race, but a different species. And I was like, well, do you know what? If they are a different species, I'd rather be that species rather than the one that I currently share with you. You waste of your dad's cup. So you get, there is a lot of sort of toxic fascist people
yeah.
hanging around, but as
It's
quite a left-leaning sort of, member of the LGBT community, I'm quite openly bi and have been, have people approach me that are in the reenactment community that are gay, that are trans, that are non-binary, or any form of the alphabet mafia, that say I don't feel comfortable in a lot of the reenactment community because a lot of them are homophobic and racist or transphobic. But you have been quite vocal about acceptance of people regardless of who they are, and they all join together by a love of historical pursuits, which has been amazing. It's been really, really amazing, especially when people sort of send you fan art and stuff like that. But then the confidence I gained from that sort of confidence boost of people thinking, well, that I am good enough to present this stuff, and that I'm someone worthy of their follow and worthy of their time and their like and their interaction in the comment section and their lovely mesh of support and the fan art they draw. It's giving me kind of more confidence to go, well, yeah, I feel like I can do this. And then I start taking on sort of bigger contracts. I've worked for Universal Pictures for some music videos. I've worked for Sony Music. I've done some TV stuff. I've went out to do some more voice acting with radio productions, radio dramas that ended up going to the BBC, and doing more stage stuff. And I get to the point where I'm doing sort of original designs, and I'm very lucky now to have a partner, my girlfriend Holly, who's very supportive and is very talented with crafts. And she is so far ahead of me sewing wise. But we go to things together and we work as a team, and having that sort of relationship bond of not only can we hang out and do cool stuff together, but we can actually follow a creative pursuit. She's a wonderful artist and a wonderful designer, and is honestly like John Wick with a hot glue gun. So it's kind of snowballing from falling into it accidentally. I ended up sort of gaining a love for something that you don't really get to do much every day.
Yeah.
And even though the work is sometimes few and far between, and people say, well, I'll pay you an exposure, and you're like, motherfucker, I can't eat exposure.
Yeah.
You end up,
honestly,
it becomes addictive because there's no working environment quite like a film set or backstage at a theatre. Backstage at a theatre, the buzz off it is like you've just done the fattest line of cocaine and you're just ready to get a blowjob. It's just the buzz is imperceptible. Everyone, 40 people have worked tirelessly for months for 3 hours a night to go off like clockwork.
Yeah.
And it becomes addictive, and the buzz off that is amazing. And it means that
where you almost have to stop yourself from taking the job where they're not going to pay you because this is not going to get me anything.
It's not gonna. It may add something to my show reel, another feather to my bow, but at the end of the day, I have rent to pay and I have financial obligations.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be like, is this worth? I know that I want to do this, but I also need the money. So if I'm going to do this, I need to get paid, even though
and my girlfriend
would
has said to me
do it for free.
She's like, Matthew, why are you doing this job? And I'm like, because I just want to fucking do it.
Yeah.
Because I know that if I go on this production, it'll look fucking cool as fuck. Because I feel like I am kind of not an expert, but I'm certainly one of the few people in Scotland who is providing this service at a relatively reasonable rate. And it's amazing, and it's really, really good fun. And you'll never find another work environment like a film set.
Not at all.
Because a lot of it, there's a quote from Generation War, the ZDF production, Unsere Mutter, Unsere Väter. And it's like, war is not about the fighting, it's about the waiting. Waiting for the next meal, the next sleep, the next engagement, the next period of rest, the next deployment. And filming is kind of like that. So it's not about the filming, it's waiting for because it's you just sat around and wait. For every 60 seconds of film you have to make, for every 6 seconds you shoot, you do 60 minutes of prep.
Yeah.
And I work so closely with the sound department that I've learned to sort of really get along with sound guys, because when you're miking up costumes, you need to speak to the costume designer. Where can I put a radio mic hidden on a uniform that won't impede the cut of the uniform, won't be visible, yet will still get clear sound? So the sound guys end up being my fucking pals. And coming from someone who I was a very introverted kid, I didn't have a great deal of friends. I wasn't really socialized because I grew up so rurally as an only child. You're forced to become very sociable. And my work in the call center, where I was speaking to hundreds of people a day via phone, kind of helped kickstart that. But you've got to be intimate with people when you're dressing them, because to dress someone, to put clothes on someone, to touch their body to measure and to size things up and to brush things off. You've got to touch someone you may have not known before, and being able to just break the tension. And there's an old tailor's term, and it's to what side do you dress, sir? Which means, what side does your dick hang on? Because if you dress to the left and your penis hangs on the left side of your body, onto your left thigh, you would take the measurement of the trouser leg inseam on the right leg, as not to run the measurement up and to just graze their penis. So you have to learn to be in a you have to learn to be in someone's personal space, and their personal space quite a lot, to make sure that you can, like, because at the end of the day, you're not touching them, and you're not, sorting them, you're sorting the garments that they're wearing. So you do have to be able to sort of break the ice and become quite personable, and you've got to then, at the end of the day, sell yourself, in a sense, because you've got to say that, because, I'm not, working with a company, I'm a freelancer, I don't have a pension or benefits or sick pay or holiday leave. Every new job that I get, I have to sell myself all over again, and talk about, what I can provide. And I've just recently started working as a marketing assistant and production designer for in-house for a production company that's quite local to me. So, as you gain these connections and network, you start to snowball and end up going from like a weird exponential curve of not knowing anything and feeling totally out of place to then feeling a part of the industry. And because Scotland is such a small country, we only have 5 million people, this film industry is very small. So you see the same faces often. I've worked with the same sound guy 3 times, just totally by chance. A Czech Republic called Lucas Kuba, who's a DJ and a really super interesting guy. But I wanted to get a t-shirt that said "Sound Czech" because he's a sound guy and also is Czech. But yeah, I feel you asked me the question about 3 hours ago, and I totally got off topic. Was that a suitable answer? Was that a suitable answer to your
I think it's
half remembered question?
No, you're fine. You're fine. That's a good answer, given the whole details of what that looks like, and a good look into the uniform design aspect of the film industry, even if it's just for student films and for low budget productions, is still important for if anyone's interested in learning more about it. What the answer you gave is definitely something that'll be very helpful, especially for someone who might be interested in doing it. I mean, honestly, your answer is a lot of just be engaged with local film schools, and you'll find your way in somehow. Everyone's looking for somebody to help
really
out.
Worm your way in. Start off small and then build yourself up, because you're not going to walk in and be like, "Hello, can I speak to Mr. Spielberg, please?"
Yeah, you can't just walk in and be like, "Can I design costumes? The guy who makes the coffee. Give me movie."
Yeah, and a good thing as well is, like, when I did the production for Sony, but probably my biggest production, that World War I music video, which I got a cameo in, I didn't get paid that much. I got paid £150. So like maybe $200 for like a month's work. But we spent 1.5 thousand to outfit 10 people for £1,300 to outfit 10 people and buy guns and get the full thing. It was really fucking hard because you can spend £1,300 on a single impression.
Yeah.
So we used re-dyed Swedish tunic for the background stuff, but we used for what's called a hero costume, which is the one that's going to be in frame, because you get your background guys. It doesn't matter what the fuck they're wearing because they're in the background. Unless you've got like 1917 money, like Sam Mendes, that has everyone kitted out perfectly. The guys in the background, it doesn't really matter what they wear because they're in shot for a second, and it's blurry, and you make sure the guy who's in frame and the most important character is dressed the best. So we used re-dyed Swedish tunics that were dyed to the green. We used, PO8 belts and plastic Brody helmets. And I got to keep a lot of that stuff at the end, but I got paid in kind. So I got to keep the Lee Enfield number 4 Mark 1. I got to keep the uniforms. I got to keep the 10 pairs of puttees, the 10 pairs of trousers, the belts, the bandoliers, all that shit. And that expanded my inventory, which led me to be more prepared for other jobs. Because someone could say, well, you've done this job. That's fair. Everything looks good. You can now get to keep all this stuff. Excellent. Keep it. Next time you go for a job, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have that in stock, but I can get it for you at a slightly higher price. But like, well, actually, I've got fucking 10 of those in the cupboard right now. And the problem is, I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment, and my flatmate, who's still currently in Krakow in Poland, is also a filmmaker. And we've made some stuff together. We've finished crowdfunding for our No Man's Land film, which also lost me a lot of followers because it's a film about gay veterans of the First World War that go to Berlin during the Weimar Republic years. And we consulted an LGBT historian, Laurie, from university in Canada, because a lot of people don't know that the Weimar Republic was a very, very liberal, accepting, very progressive society, even by today's standards, 100 years ago. Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld had established this Institute for Sexualwissenschaft, the Institute of Sexual Science, where he was assigning, he was giving gender reassignments to soldiers. And when I posted about this, telling the story of, people that would fight for a country that wouldn't accept them as real citizens, you would be imprisoned for being gay. Alan Turing, the most famous mathematician and man, the father of computers, who cracked the German Enigma code in World War II, was chemically castrated and eventually took his own life because of the persecution he faced as a gay man, having effectively won the war for Britain. And you had all these gay men that would come home from the trenches and have fought for 4 years for a king and a country that wouldn't support their rights to love who they wanted to love. And I faced a lot of backlash for coming out and saying that. And I got told straight away, oh yeah, name a gay World War I veteran. And I was like, Wilfred Owen, the man who famously wrote Dulci est pro patria mori, there is nothing more noble to die for one's country. The most famous war poem ever written was written by Wilfred Owen, a gay man. And Siegfried Sassoon, another incredibly famous British war poet, also a gay man. So, we don't need to name all these gay veterans because a lot of them couldn't name themselves. They couldn't be who they wanted. So telling that story we found to be a really important thing. And we got a lot of people that were gay veterans of the US Army, the British Army, who maybe felt pressure during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell years to not be themselves or to alter who they were. And, people in the LGBT community who feel that this is an important story of history needs to be told so that we don't forget the sacrifice of those who sacrificed a lot for basically fuck all in return.
Yeah.
And we raised a fair bit of money, and we're looking to we were going to shoot it this March, but obviously coronavirus
just keeps on
restrictions
going.
And stuff. It really just has snowballed. So we do have the money, we do have the budget there, and we are looking to film it at some point this year. It will be need a couple of rewrites because we're going to film it in winter and have it be a Christmas dinner. But with most troops not being demobilized till early 1919, we probably can just do it as the first dinner back home.
Well, the problem is with, especially with the reenactment community and the people who like to follow individuals in the reenactment community, specifically also people that I've noticed who've reached out to me, certain people, not everybody, but certain people who've reached out to me. It's interesting because people assume that, oh, you wear the uniform of a soldier from 100 years ago,
you must embody those values,
or from World War II, you must be someone who is okay with neo-Nazis. You must be someone who's okay with Holocaust denial.
Because you wear the uniform does not mean you embody the same values that the men who wore that uniform prior to you do.
It's like, I've had people get upset at me for wearing a World War I German uniform in public because they thought I'm some sort of neo-Nazi. I can kind of understand that with World War II stuff. With World War I stuff, that's just a lack of education, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But then there's the flip side where you have neo-Nazis who think you're some sort of ally to them because you wear the uniform. And then that translates to also the group of people who think that their religious views should be state policy, specifically with like the whole LGBT stuff. And so then they think that because you wear the uniform, you also think that. And it's like, no, what I do doesn't represent who I am. Like, I don't like politics. I don't like getting involved in that.
You portray a soldier from
people get too angry.
The reserve regiment, but at the end of the day, you are still Michael.
I am my own person.
You are still You
I'm
take
not.
that uniform
I'm
off
not.
and you put on a pair of slacks and a gimp suit, and that's your thing. That's who you are.
It's one of those things where I love history. Yeah, I do reenactment. But no, I don't embody the extremist beliefs of a small percentage of people from that time period. Most people from World War I, which people don't know, have a lot in common with people today, especially the Germans. Yeah. Especially, the typical soldiers. There was the revolution in Germany because people were fed up with the government. They wanted a democracy. They wanted the Weimar Republic. The whole idea of the Weimar Republic being forced upon the Germans is such an idiotic notion. The Weimar
Yeah.
Republic was a product of the German people, not of the Western
Yeah.
powers enforcing their demands.
But also on the flip side, to quote Super Hans from the eponymous British television show Peep Show, which I highly recommend you watch. You can't trust people, Jeremy. People like Coldplay and voted for Hitler.
Yep. And that's another funny thing. With Hitler getting voted in, there's that myth that it was like some overwhelming majority. And when in reality, he barely got into his position and then was
Yeah,
only able to take total power because Hindenburg was on his deathbed.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's the way I'm going to butcher this word. The way the
Historiography.
historiography of the like 19th century to like literally the fall of the Soviet Union, from the
Mhm.
fall of Napoleon, even before that, all the way to the fall of the Soviet Union. The way we perceive how those decades were, even but from the way the perception of the people who lived those decades, is so misconstrued to how it actually was, and it's interesting to look at in the way that people view you know World War II was definitely more black and white than any other conflict
Yeah,
we can really
there was a
see.
really clear defined sense
Exactly.
of good and evil.
But that really only comes about.
Nazis good, Americans bad. No, wait, hold on. Americans bad, Nazis bad. Yeah, that's it.
But in this retrospect, this hindsight being 2020, we can look at World War II and go, obviously the Allies were good and the Nazis were bad because look at what the Nazis were doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then look at what the people's motives were during World War II. No one in Britain, no one in America knew of the Holocaust.
Even when you just dive in, when you just dive into even just the most basic sort of, you're saying that the Americans were good. Are you aware that the Luftwaffe officers that were captured by the USAF that were shot down, that were garrisoned in Alabama, POW camps in Alabama, wrote home and remarked how abhorred they were, how embarrassed they were, how shocked they were at Americans' treatment of what was then the black people.
Yeah, it's fascinating that these individuals that we would assume to be horribly evil because of their outlook on, what we assume to be what their outlook was on Slavs and Jews. Generally, that was such a minor part of the population of Germany. You have these group of people who deny the fact that Hitler knew about the Holocaust, even though Hitler is literally quoted as to saying, "Who now remembers the Armenians?" So why should, in response to someone asking about what about the international backlash to us moving all the Jews and killing them, Hitler was like, who talks about the Armenians? He's on record of saying that. There's
And
definite
I
proof.
spoke to my dad. I gave a lecture to my dad. My dad had asked, what's happened with anti-Semitism? I was like, well, anti-Semitism was, in the 18th century or the 1800s was in fashion. They were a national scapegoat because they killed Jesus and they're supposedly in control of stuff. And my dad doesn't see the same scenes that I see of now sort of a creeping wave of neo-fascism, and the anti-Semitism is once again becoming an issue. And it's, history is, in a sense, very circular. We do sort of come back around to it, and it's a shame that the bad stuff has to come around as well as the good stuff that we sort of fail to learn from.
What's fascinating is the reason why a lot of people will point to, hey, look at all these people who are powerful. They also have Jewish heritage. And it's like, one, I'd argue that most people have Jewish heritage. Two, I'd like to point out that the reason why there's so many Jewish bankers and why there's so many Jewish people in prominent, powerful positions in the finance and in government is because back in like the 1600s and before that, Jews were so persecuted in your typical trades of, what was at that point lucrative trades and how you made your money. They were pushed out of those into the less lucrative taking care of other people's money. And then when things shifted towards that being the lucrative trade, the Jews were already there. And so they just took advantage of it. So that's why it's been in their families for generations. It's not because they're Jewish, it's because people pushed them there.
That does imply sort of in the 1600s that someone went, the Jews. They're in control. They're in control. The real power. I don't want to see another Jew carpenter kicking around
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Which it's just a total mindfuck. The
Yeah,
historiography
because now
cyberpunk.
it's all about the
Like, oh, if I
Rothschilds.
see one more Jewish plumber, I'll lose my fucking mind. Like, it's,
Those dang Jewish
yeah,
auto mechanics, they're stealing my transmissions.
oh, it's an international Jewish conspiracy to make me a pizza. Like,
Yeah,
it's totally nonsensical.
but back in the day, those were the lucrative trades. Those were who controlled the power were the guilds, were these these trades, and so they just pushed the Jews
Yeah,
out of that because they assumed that the Jews were bad and control of based on the over
mhm,
influence of religion, which goes against
yeah.
the Christian religion teachings. But that's another story. The over infusion of religion
Exactly.
in
Well,
culture.
as someone who's been speaking German, I've been speaking German for about 10 years. My German isn't perfect, but when I was in Berlin, I barely spoke English when I was there. I am fascinated by Jewish culture and by Yiddish specifically, how it is formed as a language over time, and as a language that is innately onomatopoeic. It's a language that's innately feeling based. To schlep somewhere, to go begrudgingly. These wonderful and this sense of humor, and it's like it's an oral culture that when you've had a specific subgroup of people that have had their belongings stripped from them repeatedly over hundreds of years of pogroms and anti-Semitic rhetoric and fake anthropological studies, when you've taken their property, you've taken their land, you've taken their jobs, you've often taken their lives, their children, their reproductive rights, their indentured servitude. What do you leave them with?
Yeah,
You leave them with an oral culture for a language to develop, for innate jokes to develop, and words that when we use words that we don't even know descend from Yiddish or Germanic roots that all have innately Jewish connotations, because when you strip things from people that much, they show so much resilience to return at full force, to be a part of their religious and cultural heritage and identity, with a language that has evolved in such a way that every word that is spoken, every single word, has hundreds of years of lexical and etymological history, that every single word has feeling behind it. And
yeah,
that I find is something that's more Yiddish. I find to be not just the language of a people and of a culture, but the language of a struggle and of heart and of compassion. And Yiddish, they say that to a Yid, German sounds like poorly spoken Yiddish, and to a German, Yiddish sounds like poorly spoken German. And while that's true from a lexical, or an etymological standpoint, where they both have descended from the same old Germanic tongue, the feeling and the cultural identity and the struggle behind Yiddish imbues it with something innately beautiful as a language, and it's something that isn't particularly often spoken.
yeah.
And only recently has there been the first ever TV show that was filmed predominantly in Yiddish, that Unorthodox, about Jews in Berlin. And it's something that you don't see, and it makes me upset to see that anti-Semitism was kind of back on the hot topic.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's
but
it's interesting because you have a lot of people alive today. We don't have there's a very very small percentage of people left who experienced the Great Depression in a way to where they can remember it. There's maybe a couple people left. So there's not really anybody who can remember a worse time than what we're experiencing now. And
yeah,
it's hard to really put a reason for things when you don't understand. And this is why history is so important. History is not the study of military tactics. It's not the study of knowing the dates of wars. History, in a practical sense and practical application, is studying how societies reacted to things and how cultural development occurred due to changes in the world situation.
exactly. And
And
I've always
so,
said you can tell a lot about a country's status in the
yeah,
world and their economic state based on their military uniforms alone.
yeah,
When you look at, say, for example, the brimless Stahlhelms by the Ottoman Empire, that tells you so much. That first of all, they had amazing trade links with Germany and a strong ally in Germany
yep,
that went and that reconstructed and modernized their military. And they were wanting to be a strong, prominent military force by wearing Stahlhelms, by wearing these steel helmets designed by ophthalmologists to reduce head wounds and to allow soldiers to keep fighting and to not be struck invalid and disabled and brain damaged by blunt force trauma that comes with the shrapnel and the artillery and the concussive blast that war brings. They want to be a modern fighting force. But the brimless at the front connotes that while they want to be a modern fighting force and a modern nation and a modernized empire, for what was essentially the oldest empire ever to exist, they also held their religious beliefs in Islam so fundamentally that even the helmets they wore to protect them allowed the forehead to touch the ground during their times of prayer.
And it's fascinating to look at. But it's so cool to like see that and like go, okay, so this kind of translates into how they would have built something. But even more so when you look at the resurgence of certain ideologies today, and everyone's like, why are we regressing? It's because of certain people in power. It's like, no, that's not why. Look at the world right now. Look at when these things were last in style, and look at the world then. You start to see parallels. Things don't come in style because certain people come into power. No, certain people come into power because these things are coming back into style, because of the environment and the culture is going full circle again. The instability of the world economy, and the instability of everyone's faith in what's going on is something that literally 0.1% of the population alive today can remember the last time it happened. Because of the propaganda of the Cold War and of World War II and the success of it, most people who grew up, who are still alive today, don't remember the bad times and only remember literally a period of time that the world has never seen and probably will never see again in terms of peace and in terms of economic growth and stability. And so now what we're seeing is we're seeing anger, and we're seeing this callousness from people because there's really no way to move up the economic ladder anymore, because we've reached a point where we've basically gone up this weird blow off. We've reached the peak of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to where now everybody is focused on trying to obtain.
Described as the point in late stage capitalism that will inevitably give way to Marxism. He described it not as an ideology that is firm and is rigid, but is cyclic.
Yeah,
and that it will give way to capitalism. Will give way to late stage capitalism, where workers are exploited and the resource depleted, where eventually another workers' revolt is likely to happen.
And you can,
especially in my own country, with the police getting new and additional and extrajudicial powers, and then complaining when people decide to push back and decide, well, actually, I'm not letting you arrest me. What I'm going to do instead is break a policeman's arm.
You can kind of see.
You start to see the seeds of the revolution beginning to be sown.
You can kind of see like this weird cycle just in the past 200 years, where you have these quick spurts of growth in terms of technology and industrial growth, met with now the people who are in control of that are exploiting the people who run it. Then the people get angry. They say no more, and you have reforms come into place that help the workers and help the people out to where they become complacent again, followed by more economic growth, more developments, and then the cycle continues. You saw that in the early 1800s with like this pre-industrial revolution, where healthcare and where you have running water, and you have these people suddenly slowly getting more and more stomped on in the ag community. And then you have it in the actual industrial revolution, where you have children literally working in coal mines. And you have ideas which today are standard, but back then were these radical socialist ideas that, people were very much so against, in terms of the people who were more...
because obviously, the old time objectivism was kind of...
exactly. So you have that technological burst, and then everything goes back into its normal flux. And then you have another industrial burst right before World War I, leading into World War I. Then you have all those new revolutions, which occur again to try to say no more.
Have you ever heard this? Because it's something when I heard it specifically pertaining to World War I, that made me really sort of think like, oh fuck, yeah. World War I was the only war in which the commander's voice could not be heard and directly influence the battle.
The only one?
Pretty much. Every war prior, the commander was only a major one. Every war prior, the the commander in charge of a group or a line or whatnot, was on horseback and could oversee
Yeah.
and influence the battle, and sort of draw
Yeah.
sort of reactionary plans. And every war after, really every major war, had radio.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's
this incredible
interesting.
cutoff. Yeah, it's just a weird way to look at it, sort of on a grander scale.
Yeah, because
when I first heard that, I sort of had to sit down and think about it.
Because even in the Balkan War, the battles were small scale enough to where the commanders in charge would be able to influence the battle and get the word spread quick enough. But that's a good point. I never heard about that. I mean, they had telegraph, but it was so delayed.
I can't remember when I heard that, or even who told me. But when I heard it, I thought, that's good, I'll commit that to memory. But I didn't bother committing any of where I learned it from, just the bare information itself.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting with looking. I find World War I so fascinating because it is a complicated subject. It is it is trying to fit.
Have you heard the bar fight analogy of how World War I started?
Yeah, the bar fight analogy I have some disagreements with, but it's a very good way to give
perfect piece of storytelling to
give. Exactly.
If someone asks how did it start? You're like,
exactly.
Bar fight analogy.
If you want to actually explain why World War I started, you have to do a massive series going back to Napoleon to explain.
Oh, if only someone had done that. Maybe we should call it lighting the powder keg.
Yeah, exactly. If only that person who would do that would also finish the series,
Mike,
too.
I don't know. Wow. Where could we find such a... I hear there's this guy, Wolf of 1914, that might be doing it at some point.
I've heard he's lazy and just doesn't finish his series and leaves them half done.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, I heard that as well.
But it's a complicated subject, and I hate how everyone...
he's a suspected furry.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so fascinating to me, especially since there's so much propaganda around it. You have World War II, where Germany won the propaganda war but lost the actual war. In World War I, Germany lost totally. They lost propaganda-wise, and they lost the military fight. So everyone looks at Germany as this instigator of the war, these butchers, and the losers of the war. And it's nice to see a resurgence in an idea of unbiased looking at it fairly. You have books like July 1914, which give a brief overview of what Europe looked like and why leading up to the war, and use documents that have recently been released that no one really wants to look at because it is hard to go into how everyone teaches World War I as it's Germany's fault because of the blank check, and say, no, that was one part of it. But if you look at what Russia and France were doing, even Joseph Joffre has more to do with starting World War I than the blank check does. You can't say that because everyone's entrenched, pun intended, in their beliefs that Germany was this big, aggressive nation when they merely blundered into World War I. Whereas Russia and France were sort of these conniving, let's get Germany. Let's start a war because Russia needed a military victory to keep them in power because of the defeat in the Russo-Japanese War. And France was looking for a way to secure their own needs in terms of economy. They didn't necessarily want revenge on Germany, but they wanted to.
There was certainly, they used revenge as sort of a propaganda tool.
Yeah, as sort of avenge Alsace-Lorraine.
Let's get the Alsace-Lorraine back, and also fuck Prussia, man.
Yeah, exactly.
The Prussian War.
Whereas Germany, they just sort of blundered into it, and then you couple that with Bismarck's Otto von Bismarck.
It's like that Rick and Morty, the Meeseeks thing. It's like, I'm only here because he brought me into this.
Well, he roped me into this.
Well, he roped me into this. Yeah,
and
it's a fucking messy nonsense.
It's a messy tangle. Whereas World War II is easy. Germany starts being aggressive. Britain and France are super well, we don't know. We don't want another war, but Germany's kind of bad. Poland will protect you. That'll stop Germany from. Germany declared war.
And then
God
Poland's
damn
like,
it.
Kurwa, chodź tutaj. And then they're like, oh fuck, I guess we better go and get them.
Yeah. But it's World War I is such a fascinating subject because not only because of how it started and how it's so applicable to studying our modern society and looking at the similarities as to how we're going and how tensions can rise up on a global scale and cause a boiling point, but also how it's literally what created today. We only have today because World War I happened and happened the way that it did. World War I is effectively one of the most influential conflicts of the world. You can make an argument for the fall of Constantinople. You can make an argument for the rise of Rome and the Napoleonic Wars. But when you look at the effect, the size of the domino that fell when a conflict happened, World War One is the domino. It is not a domino, it is the domino in the creation of the modern world. You
Yes.
had literally
I just got my earphone out.
you
Okay.
literally have the entire old doctrine, every piece of old doctrine from literally thousands of years of European history dying and die
Mhm.
with World War One. The Ottoman Empire gone.
Yeah.
All the old monarchies. The Kaiser literally means
Yeah.
emperor.
And
Tsar means
we were like,
emperor.
oh, we'll the British Empire is like, we'll draw the lines for the new place
Exactly.
that will take up the Ottoman Empire. Where will you draw these lines? Round the oil? Round the what? Nothing.
Yeah.
What was that?
Oil. I said.
The
I
oil.
said. I said the cultures, not oil.
The boil for potatoes. Like, oh, okay. And now we have
Oh,
in the Middle East, a situation so delicate and so complex and so delicate and fragile that us talking about it right now might make it worse.
yeah, exactly. Some person in the Middle East is currently watching the stream, going, "All right, time to kill some people."
Yeah, fuck.
But
Yeah.
it's this weird thing where problems that we have today, you can just trace it back to World War One, and there's no source before that. It literally, the source is World War One for like most of our problems today, and you have all these old ideas that died with World War One or began dying with World War One. Colonialism, the superiority of Europe over the entire world, the basic subjugation of China, all of those things died with World War One.
Yeah.
It literally put a time bomb on Europe as a powerhouse. World War II was a product of World War One. You look at it, World War II was worse, but it's like when you have a cancer in a part of your body, so you get it cut out. That's World War One.
Yeah.
World War II is when the doctors screwed it up, and now you have cancer all over your body. World War II was far worse, but it only could have happened as bad as it did
it was
because
a
of World War
precedent
One.
set by the first.
World War One is improperly removed stage 1 cancer. World War II is the beginning of stage 4. Effectively.
Yeah.
You just skip everything else. And it's why I focus on it so much. Everyone loves to point to World War II as this critical moment for the world, and the death of colonialism, and the death of Europe as a powerhouse, and the start of our modern world. And that's just not true. We love to hamper on it because it was this big moment for America. It was this big
more
moment
recently,
for...
I've been specializing in colonialism. I'm just doing my semester's been centered around African history from 1800 to 1939. So my history lecture was from South Africa, and we did an entire seminar on the Schutztruppe campaign under Paul Emil von Lettow-Vorbeck, the leader from Africa, in Tanganyika in the First World War. And she knew that I knew a lot about it, so she basically went, Matthew, on you go. And she basically let me give a seminar on the Schutztruppe, which was nuts. And at one point I was like, well, of course, a lot of them were looking to use the Gewehr 98, and I'd be like, here's one here. just getting these things out. And it was interesting. It was nice to be able to kind of present a university seminar.
So you know how East Africa effectively got under British control in around 1915, 1916, right? And that's when Vorbeck was basically like, guerrilla warfare time, we're just going to run around. Warfare.
He didn't surrender 2 weeks after the war.
I have a note printed in German East Africa, a piece of German money printed in 1915, shortly before the British occupation was fully enforced.
No way.
I bought it at an antique store for, I don't know, I think like 30.
Are you aware of the Schutztruppe payroll, like sort of the back pay that was issued in 1964, not long after Vorbeck's death?
Really? That's interesting.
The Schutztruppe fought on credit from 1915 onwards, as you all know. They couldn't pay their soldiers, their Ascari. So after Vorbeck died in 1964, and his state funeral was in Potsdam and attended by some Ascari, a paymaster from the newly formed Bundeswehr and a member of the federal German government, the Bundesregierung, went to Lake Tanganyika, and they shot out old Schutztruppe veterans who fought under Vorbeck. And because Vorbeck gave them a chitty, kind of an IOU, saying, you will get paid. And they never did. And so they went to East Africa, and they they collected all these chitties, these notes saying that you served, so it's kind of a receipt of service to give the back pay. But obviously, people lose bits of paper.
Yeah.
In arid climates like Africa, paper can deteriorate. So they had an idea. Some people would bring in buttons from the uniforms as proof of service. But they had an idea. Take the head off a broom, so you've just got a broomstick, and have each claim to be a Scari perform the German manual of arms. Präsentiere das Gewehr über, das Gewehr umhaken, etc., etc., to prove that they were a member of the German forces. Not a single Ascari failed the test, and every Ascari that applied for their back pay got their back pay and pension.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. See, that's kind of what I like about the Germany after World War II, is that they sought after to make amends for everything that they saw as a wrongdoing in their history.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really see that with other nations. Britain kind of plays around with the idea because they kind of have to, because of how much garbage that they've done to the world. France just kind of says, no, screw you. And it just doesn't do anything like that. I mean, maybe a little bit, but they don't even atone for their sins in Northern Africa from literally just a few decades ago. America just flat out ignores it most of the time.
Yeah, but of course,
America will talk about it and say, we did these things, we're sorry. Bye-bye.
But
That's all we
Germany
need to
still
say.
hasn't atoned. Germany still hasn't atoned for their genocide of the Herero people.
They've actually started to pay money, and they've sent money.
They've started now, but they really have been dragging their heels on it.
Yeah, and that's mainly because there was a lot of arguments about.
There's been a lot of arguments, especially after the Hehe conflicts as well.
Yeah,
there's 10,000 German Namibians still living in Namibia, white German settlers. And it's like they are starting to make amends. You'll find it on the BBC website. There's a wonderful audio documentary about the reparations that they're looking to put forward.
But it's interesting because one of the reasons why that hasn't really happened is because of how little it was important to the German government, and because a lot of the documents relating to it were burned in 1945 when Königsberg got bombed.
Clausewitz.
So there was no way for people to confirm that A, it was a purposeful genocide, and B, the number of people dead. I mean, I mentioned it in my video about Kaiser Wilhelm II, how there's no way that Kaiser Wilhelm didn't know it happened, but the question is, did he order it or not? He knew about it, and he was okay with it, but did he order it? See, if he ordered it, that makes it a lot worse for him, whereas if he knew about it and didn't care, that's bad. That's really bad, but it's not as bad as saying, go kill all these indigenous people.
Yes.
But
of course.
I literally had somebody on that video comment, and he had very, very poor English, and the channel looked like he was from Africa, and someone indigenous from Africa, and he was basically saying that the Herero people poisoned that water hole and then ended up having to retreat through it, so they ended up just screwing themselves over. And I was like, where's your sources, dude? Like, Germany has literally said that they found documents saying that they were ordered to poison. The only reason why the amends have come out now is because someone was able to prove that the Germans themselves poisoned the water holes. And there was some photos that came out of Germans standing in front of executed women and children, smiling.
Yeah.
But then you compare it to Austria, which I don't think pays any money to Serbia for the war crimes in Serbia. Or you have Britain, which I don't think pays any money to the local Boer population in South Africa for their horrible actions. And then you look at France, which I don't think sends any money to Algeria. I mean, North Africa, but even America, the United States sends money to the indigenous populations that we so often screwed over at the bare minimum.
Yeah.
But Germany is one of the few other nations that, I think the only other nation that sends money to other nations because of previous crimes, which I think is very respectable, if not some. I know some people make fun of them for it, haha, but it's these guys, they're owning up to their mistakes, and that's something most nations don't do. Because
it's good to atone for
the
wrongdoings of a nation as a whole.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating to look at in terms of what the other nations do versus, the standard.
Yeah, it is genuinely fucking mental. History is
it is
so big and so all encompassing.
Yeah.
But I might need to head off relatively soon, so I need to get my coffee.
Yeah, we've been doing the live stream for a bit longer than an hour, which is generally
Literally
how long they run.
100 minutes.
Yeah, 100 minutes.
100
So
minutes.
I appreciate you coming on. We should definitely do this
Dude,
again.
honestly,
Maybe.
the pleasure was all mine. It was really, really great to speak to you.
Yeah, it was great to speak to you too. Maybe you can drag me onto the First Battalion podcast at some point, which I will link in the description of this video.
If we ever end up recording a new episode, absolutely. It's a lot less fly by night, fucking less structured, ridiculous patter. But yeah, absolutely, we'd love to have you on.
Definitely. And we'll have to discuss something about putting up a website for actual resources for people developing uniforms, because one doesn't exist at all. You have those crappy boomer websites, but it'd be cool to get a bunch of people in the First Battalion and a bunch of the Instagram guys to get together their resources that they use, put it in one massive resource for people, and that'd be pretty cool. But
having a handy codex would be
exactly. Even guidebooks, just that you can download as a PDF.
Exactly, that would be ideal. That would be absolutely ideal. I would love that. We'll discuss that. I'll get in the Discord and we'll put together some plans.
But I appreciate you coming on. It's been fun. It's definitely been a fun discussion.
Thanks for your time. It's honestly been. Thank you for having me on. It's been great.
Hey, thanks for being here. I'll catch you around.